Hello and welcome to this bonus episode of 21 for 21. This week we're going to bring you parts of a talk that Jamie gave at Birkbeck University in London. So, Jamie, first of all, who were you speaking to?
Yeah, I was speaking to some students, like you say, but they were modern languages, translation, and journalism students. I don't think that was the course as such. I think some of them were doing just modern languages, some were doing modern language and translation, some were doing modern languages and journalism. And yeah, no, I got invited to speak with them because of the work that I do. I do a lot of Spanish and Catalan to English translation, as well as the journalism and sport media production that I do. So. Um, yeah, I guess I was quite a good fit for someone in the industry to talk to some of the students, and it was good talk. There were a good amount of questions. Then they were, quite interested. I've done a few of these sorts of talks, and I always feel like I'm a bit of an ego-driven thing because it's sort of like they always ask about like what do you do and how did you get there, and
Yeah, I mean, that's quite interesting because you're out there, modern language translation and journalism students, we're a mixture of the three. You weren't a student in
yeah.
that. So I guess that's the interesting link that although it's great that they're doing this degree, that is just one of the routes to get to the position you're in at the moment.
Sure, sure. No, and I of course, and I say it frequently that I feel very lucky and fortunate to be in the position I am in and doing the work I do. And so it was nice to meet some people that kind of intentionally want to do that. They've got this sort of game plan that they're going to get their degree
Yeah,
and then go on to do this kind of work. And we spoke to Ronan Malt several weeks back now on episode, I want to say 14.
13 or 12.
Okay.
12. Just
Early
12.
teens.
12. So
Okay. And he was, a professional translator as well for various teams and athletes. That's my cat. um, but so yeah, it was nice to be able to kind of like reflect on what I do a little bit as well. It was an opportunity for me to reflect a bit on what I do and talk about that as well.
yeah, I think it's definitely a good opportunity for our listeners and viewers on this bonus episode is to bring together the themes we've talked about in terms of if you want to work in sports media, you either need the passion for sports or a niche that you can turn into sports. And maybe for these students, translation and language skills is their way to go.
Yeah, absolutely. And I quite often encourage non-modern language students that I speak to that want to get into sport media to learn a language because at the end of the day, we're talking about a global market, global competitions, and athletes from all over the world. So I think it's quite a nice idea to look at what sport you want to get into and look at who speaks what, and maybe pick a language and try and have a go.
Yeah, I think that's certainly as good advice as any. And we hope you enjoy listening to Jamie's talk.
And hello, everyone. As mentioned, I'm Jamie. I currently live in Barcelona, and it's true. I came here 6 years ago, and no, I could barely order a beer. um, I've since learned Spanish and Catalan reasonably well. I've attended maybe a handful of classes at most. However, my wife is from here, although we speak in English, but her family I speak with in Spanish, and majority of the work I do is in Spanish. Certainly behind the scenes, the kind of the working language is Spanish or Catalan. In fact, there's a lot of Catalan at FC Barcelona, but all the kind of output is in English because I work for Barca TV Plus, which is kind of the online uh, international channel, if you like. And I'll get into that a bit more. So yeah, as mentioned, the title for this presentation is Narration and Translation, Life as a Journalist Abroad. And yeah, I'm going to speak a bit about kind of what I do, the translation work I do, and how I got into it, and any sort of recommendations. In fact, I've got a slide that sort of says what I'm going to talk about. Things that are going on in the world of sport broadcast and sport media, what it means, and then any kind of recommendations for people who are perhaps interested in getting into sport media. If at any point anyone's got a question, do not hesitate to stop me and ask a question. I'm not a massive fan of PowerPoints and slides and things. I've got some videos to show as well, which I hope work. If you, any technical issues as well, to sort of shout up. But if you've got any questions at any point, do feel free to jump in and we'll have a bit of discussion. So yeah, without further ado, I wanted to start with a little bit of a quote from a Spanish journalist called Fernando Jauregui, and it's from a book called Periodismo 2030, Journalism 2030, which is kind of it's a very timely book about everything that's happened with COVID and with Twitch streaming and with new media and what that means for the world of journalism. And this quote particularly caught my eye. It says, "There's almost nothing comparable to the vocation of journalism with its need to narrate reality or realities." And that really hit home with me. For as long as I can remember, I've been a storyteller. I've been the kind of person that has to talk. I'm a big talker, but also write or make video or talk about what's going on in the world and what that means. He then adds that it's the being there that we've sort of lost during these times of COVID. Being able to tell that reality, seeing it up close with your own eyes in detail. And that's, you know, right now I'm talking to a screen of little avatars, and I do miss that interaction as well. But yeah, for me, that what really resonated with me about this quote was this kind of this kind of need to narrate reality or realities. And that's what I do for a living, actually. Here's me at the Camp Nou. I've worked at FC Barcelona for almost a year and a half, almost 2 years, a year and a half. I've been there I joined last summer when they were going to launch the Barca TV Plus international platform. It's essentially Netflix for FC Barcelona fans, with also a typical 24-hour rolling TV program. Linear programming is what it's called in kind of media theory. And I joined the kind of big launch that they have planned. Didn't work out because of COVID, sadly. But what I do there is I commentate football matches. I'm a presenter. I'm going to show you some videos of stuff that I do in a minute. I do some management of the kind of the back end of the website, publishing videos and stuff, although not so much anymore. I have been in press conferences asking questions. I am also a translator, which is everything from subtitles to the simultaneous translation of press conferences and interviews and live TV. So a little bit of everything. And that's something that I want to talk about as well, is that in this world of media, it's very multifaceted. I don't know if any of the students, I know you're kind of language and linguistics students, I don't know if any of you are interested necessarily in journalism or media, but I'm going to sort of talk about some of the skills involved there as well. And the two go hand in hand. And as I said, I'm this person, I do a lot of things, and I've always been a kind of a polymath, I think is the word, which is kind of someone that, well, you probably know, you're all linguistics students. It's someone that kind of has no one specialty and is interested in a lot of things, and that's very much me. But I think that in this world now of TV and journalism is the norm. People do a little bit of everything. So I'm going to show you just a short video of some of the things that I do. This is kind of my on-screen demo. So there's a bit of presenting, there's a bit of clowning around. We have a lot of fun, or I have a lot of fun in the work I do. It's by no means serious work. Well, it's serious work, but we have a lot of fun in the meantime as well. But in addition to that, there's also the commentary, and I'll show you as well some of the translation. So this is a little bit of the work that I do on a weekly, monthly basis.
Jamie, biggest foodie and cooler journalist in Barcelona.
You know, maybe show off some skills. Maybe we could have a bit of one-on-one after. Maybe take me to the Palau and do some training.
Like a human calculator. Dear contestants, to make the recipe for a grilled cod with a Swift peri-peri sauce, you need to get these ingredients.
Ingredients, which one?
Desalted cod loin, dry peri-peri chili. Is it very spicy? Yeah? I'll try a little one and then... It's pretty spicy.
I wanted to ask you about some of the up-and-coming Barca B players. Elias Moriba, Oscar Mingueza, they've no doubt left their mark this season. You've also called up Iñaki Peña quite regularly, although he's yet to make his debut. Conrad's also been called up.
Conrad, you're from Florida, right?
Yeah.
In Florida, they eat alligator.
Yeah. Yeah, I think
Is
so,
that a
but
thing?
I don't.
You don't.
I don't.
You ever tried it?
No. No.
I know, as long as the sea is here, then that's north. That's east, that's south. So
Yeah, that's
more or less.
That's south.
More or less.
That's
That's
north.
south, is it?
Yeah.
We're starting badly. This is not going to go well.
East it is.
My memory didn't fail me.
It's north, Seashine, it's north. We're here to see Città Sportiva, where the red team have lost yet another challenge.
My mouth's burning. That's spicy as well. Serginho Dest on the red team playing on the left. And on the right, we've got Comrade De La Fuente in the blue team. Brandon Davis then with the tortilla flip. First tortilla flip in the history of this young player. Nice touch of the ball from Comrade. Look at that. Nicely rounding it off. Let's cross over to the red side and have a look at Dest. Dest rounding out that ball really nicely. Look at that. Here we go. Brandon Davis. With the 180, with the tortilla de patatas. Comrade's going in with the balls, crossing it over from the plate to the pan, and that's nice movement with the foot. We like that from Comrade De La Fuente. Plenty of speed, plenty of style, no hesitation. So Serginho Dest is about to make the transfer, plate to pan. Let's take the final shot. Top corner, that's a fantastic goal by Serginho Dest from the meatball, from the plate to the pan. Go, 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 go. Very good, you're natural. Let's see how it comes. Brandon Davis here in Brandon Davis with a successful 180 flip. Now he's got to get it back into the pan. This is a very, very crucial moment.
Yeah.
We didn't even count. Brandon, do you think I can play basketball better than you can cook?
It's a close one. We'll see.
So basically, we'll get to the main road here, and the deal should be right there.
Yep.
Do you think he'll have some presents?
I wish.
Barca B have had a really remarkable season. They almost got the promotion. So who else has stood out to you from the reserves that could be the future of this club?
I'm not noticing anything else. I was sad that the Theo didn't have any presents.
Yeah,
Like the whole
some
point of the
surprise.
Theo is presents, and I've been really good.
9 because it's my favorite number.
That's a
what-
good enough reason for me.
That's my reason.
Let's go with 9 because it's Amy's favorite number. Well, we lost the challenge, but no worries. The season's long. We could come back from this, and well, let's look forward to the next challenge and try and come back stronger. They call you Rambo on the court. I want to call you Rambo in the kitchen because that tortilla is the bomb. So I hope the audio and everything worked correctly. So as you can see, we're doing a little bit of everything. This year, actually, I'm also doing more kind of out on the street, meeting fans and interviewing fans and stuff. But yeah, so everything from a cooking show to press conferences with Ronald Koeman, the former manager of FC Barcelona. Yeah, a little bit of everything. And I hope that gives you a bit of a taste. That's kind of my reel from last season. And yeah, so I'm fairly sure that I wouldn't have got this job, which I love so much, if it weren't for having learned Spanish. Because the reality is now that sport media is all online. It's all digital. It's all everywhere. And as a result, clubs like FC Barcelona or Manchester United or Liverpool or any club in the world, PSG is a good example. They're working pretty hard at the minute on that kind of stuff, are now having a global reach. Not just, FC Barcelona is no longer just in Catalonia and Barcelona. In fact, it's always had a global reach. Let's be honest, the fans around the world love FC Barcelona. But as a result, they're kind of like, well, the media that we're creating, the TV shows that we're creating should also have this global reach and give everyone access. So that's why they launched their English channel. But in addition to that, well, they also have the Catalan Spanish channels. But in addition to that, they also have what's known as localized content. And that could be kind of the short form videos on TikTok or YouTube Reels or YouTube Shorts, or Instagram Reels or wherever. Or just simply tweets or Instagram posts or Facebook posts, the usual stuff. But it's not now enough to just translate that content. It's not just enough to have it in all the different languages. actually what they do is they try and localize a lot of the content, what's called localization, where they'll have maybe people on the ground in emerging markets such as Malaysia, or maybe in South America, or America. The USA is a big one. That certainly the kind of the two big companies I've worked for, Barcelona and MotoGP, have targeted. So they want to reach that audience more. America's always kind of exported sport, whether it's been NFL, NHL, I know UFC. But now a lot of clubs and associations are trying to export theirs to America. America's seen a big boom in soccer lately. So it's an emerging market in that sense. And it's not, like I say, it's not enough now to just translate content. It's not enough to have someone that knows English or knows American English to translate the Spanish and Catalan into English. We've got now someone joined our team from Chicago. So we can really have an authentic take on that. And the same is true of other languages, whether it's, I don't know, maybe Arabic or I don't know, Chinese or whatever language it is that market, and we have localized content. So I was speaking just before with Lisa saying that yesterday was Diwali, and for Barcelona, particularly the Indian market, they produce content specifically about Diwali, although it went out on all their main channels as well. But actually a lot of this stuff you don't see because it is what's called geo-blocked. So Barcelona, for example, FC Barcelona or MotoGP or Formula One or NHL or anyone, Premier League, could put out content that only gets seen in a certain country or a certain region. And there are companies that specialize in localization. Samba Digital is quite a big one. I know some people from there, and they work as they do everything from consultancy to content creation, and they do collaborate with people on the ground in these countries, in these markets. So what I'm saying essentially is that sport is moving into different markets. I put this one because it's but global markets. This is a good example because motorsport has always struggled getting into America and competing with NASCAR and IndyCar, and it's never quite had the success that it's had in Europe. And I don't know if anyone's seen Netflix Drive to Survive, the Formula One series. It's very good. It's worth a watch. And it's boosted, I think it was in the news last week, it doubled, I think, the Grand Prix at the Circuit of the Americas, which was contested 2 weeks ago. I think it doubled the fans that were there in person for the race. So it's clearly had an effect. And that was one way for Formula One to try and reach that US market. But they're also, I know, working hard to try and reach other markets. I'm no doubt Drive to Survive. There you go. Christina says, I'm hooked. It's so exciting. It's an interesting series because they've got a lot of the behind the scenes stuff. You know, you get to meet the drivers, meet their teams. It's not just about the sport. Christina, were you a Formula One fan before you saw the series, or did the series kind of bring you to Formula One?
I thought you were going to ask if I was a Formula One driver.
No, a fan. Well, maybe you're a driver. I don't know.
Well, I was. I mean, it was always something that, you know, you'd see it on TV. It was very, very thrilling. But then this series just turned everything upside down because we got to get to know the people, like the personalities, like how they really are. And it's always, you know, very exciting for somebody who is a fan of something. Can be music, can be, you know, anything, to get to know the person. Because we know nothing about the characters or the personalities, and we just see them driving or we hear stuff about them. And then this series gave us the opportunity to see how they are on the daily routine, what they like, how if they laugh, if they find things funny, if they're serious. So yeah, for me it was amazing series. And the same with Schumacher, the other series. It was very, very interesting too.
Yeah, they've been great series, and they've had the effect, I think, that Formula One were going for. They've brought maybe non-fans or maybe just casual fans more into the fold, and as a result, their viewership has gone up massively, and as has their in-person presence at events. So I wanted to use that as an example of how sports are getting into the American market, but it's not just the Americas. It's all over the world that they're creating content. I've no doubt that Netflix put Formula One out, Drive to Survive out in in various languages. Certainly, it's in Spanish here in Spain. I have no doubt that it's, if not in all the major languages, if not more. So it's a way that sports associations, sports teams are working to bring in more fans through content and through, as I say, translated and localized content. So one of the things that I did during the summer, Mohammed mentioned it in the intro, there was obviously a very infamous event happened at FC Barcelona, and that was the departure of Leo Messi. Have we got any Barcelona fans in, or not necessarily? Well, it was big news all over the world in the world of football. Tom's a Chelsea fan, that's all right. But I think even if you weren't a fan of football, there were very few people that were not aware of Messi leaving FC Barcelona, having spent his entire career there, and everyone thought he'd end his career there as well, including, I think, Leo Messi. Everything seemed to be a done deal so that he could renew his contract. I can tell you, without kind of getting in too much trouble, I think, that the club, from our point of view, we'd made content videos ready for both scenarios, as I know MotoGP have for the retirement of Valentino Rossi, or Formula One probably have for Lewis Hamilton changing teams, or the various rumors and news that come surface. As a broadcaster or as a content creator or as a rights holder, you have to be prepared for everything. And if there's rumors that one of the biggest stars of the club may be staying or leaving, you have to create content for both. But I know from our point of view, and we did have content for both because it's a normal thing, that we thought he was staying. It all seemed to be pointing that way. And it's just, actually, there's probably a good moment to say that even though I work for FC Barcelona and Barca TV Plus, we're essentially in no better knowledge of anything than any other kind of major news outlet. We just happen to focus on FC Barcelona, and we've got maybe more access to players and stuff, but it's not like we get any particular exclusives or anything like that. So the first that certainly I knew about Messi leaving was, we all thought it was a marketing trick. Yeah, well, that's I think a lot of people did. The first thing I knew about it, I think it was a Thursday night. There's kind of like this chatter kind of emerged on Twitter saying that it's not happening. Messi's leaving. And I was like, what? What's going on? What's going on? And then before we knew it, there's an official press release put out by the club, and that was only circulated within very, very internal channels, and rightly so. I'm not even sure if it reached a majority of the communication department. And so it was kind of like, oh my God, what's happening? Is this really happening? And so we had content ready just in case. We had videos and stuff, but we weren't quite sure what to do about it. There wasn't really a plan in place because it all pointed to him renewing, and we thought within a few days we'd be announcing that. And that was like the Thursday. And I remember I called my boss and was like, I'm only 15 minutes away from the office if you need me to go in. And he was like, well, we're having an emergency meeting about it. We'll see what we could do. And in the end, we put like a ticker across the bottom of the live, the rolling programming that sort of said, Messi is having to leave the club because of the rules put in place by La Liga, and so that was all quite shocking. And then on the Sunday was his press conference, which he got very emotional. It was seen, as Mohammed said in the intro, on Barca's YouTube. Now it's at around 10 million views. I think it was watched live by something like 1.2, but it also went out on Sky Sports and I think BT Sport. That's in the UK. I'm not sure elsewhere, but certainly Barcelona kind of gave the stream to other broadcasters. I think ESPN did some stuff with it, and I've certainly seen like clips going on BBC News and BBC Sport and elsewhere. And I did you watched it, Tom. So I did the simultaneous translation, which I'd done simultaneous translation before. I did it when I first joined the club. My boss kind of said, you need to do simultaneous translation. It wasn't something I'd done previously. And I just sort of, I sat down and watched a lot of videos and practiced and sat with some of my local colleagues to make sure that I was kind of not missing anything major or not making too many mistakes. And you just have to get used to it. And one of the first simultaneous translations I did was when Luis Suarez left the summer previous to Messi leaving. And so I was kind of like, and I was fairly used to it. I'd done a lot of the Ronald Koeman's pre-match press conferences and various other things. It's something we do a lot in the club. A lot of our interviews that we put out on social media and stuff, we also do dubbed rather than subtitled because it's quicker and easier. Christina.
Yes, hi again. And taking the opportunity, I would like to thank you for for sharing your experiences with us. Just a very quick question. So contrary to translation, that you have all the time in the world to sit down and look things up and do your little research and investigation. Interpreting is something that you need to do on the spot. So have there been any occasions like that? I mean, it can happen to anyone. Your brain just gets stuck and you can't find that word, or you don't really understand what the person is saying because I don't know, they might have an accent or something. And how do you manage to overcome this? And because you have to do it apparently super quickly. To get on with the conversation and everything. Has it ever happened to you? I mean, I'm very interested to know. And how would you try to overcome this slip and move on?
Yeah, so it happens. It does happen. Yeah, I normally try and take a laptop or something in with me, and have like Google Translate or something open more frequently than a word that I don't know coming up or something I don't know coming up. It's like something that I can't remember the English for in that moment, and that's more frustrating because it's like I know what he's talking about and I know what he's saying, but I can't think of the specific thing I need to say in English. But I do preparation. I do, if it's a pre-match press conference, for example, I will look at the squad lists or the call-up lists that the coaches have pulled up. So for both teams, so I know if there's a question about a specific player, that maybe I don't know, or that I'm not, I don't know all the teams in La Liga, all the teams in the UEFA Champions League in Europe. At least I've got a list in front of me, and I can go, it's him, and I've got that name, or I maybe look up things that we can anticipate. So maybe I don't know if there's a look through the news, there's a player injured, I can make sure I know the vocabulary for that particular injury in both languages. So that if I hear it in Spanish, maybe I'm not always, I don't know, spend a lot of time talking necessarily about injuries and body parts. So that's maybe something I'm not always aware of, or in Catalan, but also in English to make sure I've got all the correct vocabulary on hand. And then with Messi, it's true. I the night before, I was like, I've not really seen many interviews with Messi. I don't know if you know, he's a very private person and he doesn't often speak with press. I've not really heard much Messi. He's got an Argentinian accent. I learned all my Spanish here in Spain and in Catalonia. And I was sort of like, I was a little bit panicked by it, if I'm honest. I didn't think it as a big a deal as it ended up being. And so the night before I did, I sat down and watched, I don't know, I probably spent an hour or so, maybe a bit longer, on YouTube watching Messi interviews to kind of like tune my ear. I've got some Argentinian friends and stuff, but to get used to him and the way he talks. I then made notes of things like the name of his wife, the name of his children, just in case he spoke about them. So I'd have them to hand. Things like the year that he joined the club, or try to anticipate some things. So I don't know if that answered your question or not. I think there's another part of it that I've maybe not answered. Yeah, okay. But certainly, in simultaneous translation, you can't spend too long. That's what you're saying about the speed of it and moving on, because otherwise, they're on to the next question or they're on to the next topic, and you're still on the previous thing. But there are a few ways of doing it. You don't have to be kind of literal to what they say. You can just sort of say, now he's talking about this, or now he's talking about when that happened, and certainly in a press conference, everyone kind of does that thing where there's like, I'm Jamie Coles for Boss TV Plus live right now, and I wanted to ask you there, and they go through the kind of like their 5 seconds of fame, So certainly for questions, I kind of get the gist of the question and answer that. Ask that, translate that, and then focus on the interesting thing, which is the person that's giving the press conference. So that was kind of, it all happened very suddenly. And yeah, that went out on Sky Sport. It went out on a whole segment. I've got a little video prepared that we can watch just to hear me in action. And as I said, I've been in Spain for 6 years. I came with very little Spanish, and I'm not a trained translator by any means. So this was just through practice and ignorance, really. So I'll play it for you, and you can just kind of see the kind of work that goes out on that side of things. So this is a clip from a Sky Sport. They did like a whole 10-minute segment. Obviously, it was the leading news around the sporting world. So here's the clip from it.
He never wanted to leave Barcelona. He wanted to end his career here and go beyond that. Of course, there was that wobble he said 11 months ago. That was more an issue with the then president. But since then, he changed his mind. He had a full and complete change of heart. Loved this club. Didn't want to go anywhere. He's upset. His family's upset. And it shows.
It was like a blood ran cold because it was really sad, really difficult. Well, up until now, we're still trying to process it all. And when I'm going to go home, I'm going to feel still pretty bad about the whole thing. It's going to be even worse, but the important thing is that we're okay, my family, my loved ones, and that I get to keep playing football. That's what I like doing more than anything in the world. And now, I'm sure now it's going to be a bit difficult, but we need to move on. I'm very sad because I didn't want to leave this club. It's the club that I love. And the moment that I didn't expect, because like I said at the start, I never lied. I've always been honest and upfront. Last year I wanted to leave. This year I didn't. And that's why I'm so sad.
So yeah, and that was a pretty wild sort of 48 hours of people messaging me, oh, I heard your voice on TV. And there was a meme as well, because Messi was so emotional, and they were going, even the translators crying. And it's true, one of the things I have to kind of wrestle with is like the tone when I'm translating, because you're so focused and you know, I didn't want to miss anything. And also Messi speaks kind of quite staccato. He'll talk a little bit, and I guess because of the emotion as well. He talks a little bit. And so people were sort of going, oh, even the translators are And then Greg James on Monday morning, after they did the Radio 1 Newsbeat report, he jumped in as well. I want to play this because it's quite funny.
Lionel Messi has said an emotional goodbye to Barcelona.
This is really difficult for me after so many years being here my entire life.
He is leaving the Spanish club because they cannot honour a new contract due to league rules there. He's expected to join French side PSG. Today's weather, heavy showers and then some flood warnings for England. Drier and sunnier tomorrow. This is Newsbeat at 7:33.
Yes! Oh, biggest stretch. Ben, can you play the Lionel Messi audio again, please? Because I just feel like the translator needs to be a bit more emotional. I think that if you're translating crying and tears, you also need to cry. Let's hear it again, please.
I totally agree with that. Here we go.
Hang on. This is really difficult for me after so many years being here my entire life.
That's what you need. I could have voiced it up for you. Could have gone a full E and B or I've got nothing left, etc. Nice to have you on, Ben.
See you a bit.
So that was fun as well. It was nice to be part of fall into popular culture memes, but it was an absolutely wild 48 hours. Quite hard to believe it all, really. And the story is that actually it was one of those things that I was kind of reluctant to do because we had a big match that evening as well that I was commentating, and it ended up being a really long day. And when my boss sort of said, "Hey, we need someone to do the Messi press conference," I was less than enthusiastic. But hey, I've now kind of got my name there as the guy that did that moment. So yeah, that was interesting, and it's all done from just a little room with a windowless room with a little screen and a microphone, and that's kind of it, really. In fact, the first time I saw the press room at the Camp Nou was a few weeks ago, because of COVID and stuff. The restrictions have been in place, so I hadn't actually been. I just been in my little box with a screen and a microphone. So that's a kind of, you know, a bit of overview of what I do and why. Obviously, I used to talk about sports association and clubs and stuff, trying to reach new markets and bigger audiences and trying to increase obviously their income, which is at the end of the day, these are all businesses. I just wanted to show this really quick because I thought it was quite interesting. As you're not sports media or sports journalism, so you might not find it so interesting, but I just thought it was interesting that soccer, football is now got almost a 40% share of the world's global media value. And I think that just goes to show how important football, soccer is, but also the clubs and associations and rights holders, whether it's Premier League, Liga, Manchester United, FC Barcelona, are looking at the big picture, the global picture. And then sort of up and coming sports, we talked about Formula One and motorsport already. Cricket is quite a big share, but it's obviously very big in India. They've got franchised cricket in India. And then golf, allegedly PGA Tour have got a Netflix series coming out from the same people that made the Formula One Drive to Survive. So we'll see what impact that has on their global media value. And then, of course, I just wanted to drift away from sport, but talk about how we are in a global media setting. I don't know if any of you have seen Squid Games. I've not, but I do know it was the fastest watched series on Netflix all over the world, and it's not even an American or European series. So I think that's quite significant, and it just goes to show Casa de Papel, which was a money heist, was pretty big here in Spain, and that ended up going global as well. It just goes to show the reach that sport, that media, that TV has now, and that localized content is going global, and everything's becoming has got these global audiences. And as a result, they need people that can translate and then know the local cultures as well, because I think that's important. I talked a bit about localization already. And people ask me, can't AI do this? And I answer quite sincerely, I don't know if you all see that well. It's YouTube auto-generated artificial intelligence subtitles. It couldn't be more wrong. And I say quite often that no, not just because of the literal translation of things, but also because of the cultural context. There's a series in Spain that is in, I think it's Sevilla, in Seville, and they say mi alma, which sounds like armor, but actually they say alma, which means my soul, and it's sort of an endearment. But because it sounds like armor, it sounds like my weapon, and that's what it got translated to on the Netflix, the English version in the subtitles. So there are things like that you need to know the local context, and you need to have, I think, for now at least, human ears. Certainly AI is doing incredible things. But yeah, so that's kind of in this world of media and content production, where as linguists, I don't want to call myself a linguist, but where there's opportunity, I think. The last thing I want to do is maybe talk a little bit about how people could get into sport media or media in general, if you're interested in that sort of thing. It's a nice quote from the book Outliers by Malcolm Gladwell, which I would recommend reading. And basically, practice is key. Why has that gone backwards? There we go. Because I think the best thing people can do if you're interested in creating content or working in kind of broadcast or media is to start creating content or media. The barriers to creating content are lower than ever. I should know. I had a podcast with a friend about sport media. He's a sports marketer, and basically we were having a conversation about Twitch stream and about Messi and Gerard Piqué's got his own media company and stuff. And we were talking about these things, and we were like, maybe some other people are interested in this. So we started a podcast, and we just did. And the barriers are incredibly low. You need very little technical expertise. Obviously, I probably got more technical expertise than the average person, but really, a lot of this stuff you could do on a cell phone. There are applications now where you can
create a podcast or stream live or record video, and you can do it all on a cell phone. And I think, you know, we've seen this boom in fan channels, fan content, and it is because the barriers are incredibly low. One of the things I wanted to share just on the side of the screen here is this side of the screen. Is the content pyramid, the content plan by Gary Vaynerchuk, Gary V. Love him or hate him, he knows what he's doing with content creation and media. And he basically says that any piece of content, you can have like a main pillar piece of content. So that maybe would be a podcast episode. And then from there, you can make smaller things of it. So you maybe take a bit of video, or you put a photo and put a quote from the episode in it, or you take a 2-minute clip, or you transcribe it into text. And then from there, you can distribute it across the platform. So maybe the investment of doing a 45-minute podcast or an hour-long podcast or whatever, you could probably get, I don't know, 30 different pieces of content across different platforms. I know I'm kind of rushing this a little bit. But I think for anyone interested in creating content, that would be the way to do it. Maybe if your interest is in translation, you find your niche, whether it's, I don't know, if you're a Formula One fan, say, there are plenty of press conferences and interviews, and maybe you connect to Twitch time of the press conference, or you take to Twitter and you live translate it. And then you can record it, then you could upload that as a video on YouTube. You could upload it also the audio as a podcast, and then maybe you could transcribe it and write an article about what we learned from that press conference. Maybe take a photo from the press conference and put a quote on it and put it on Instagram. And before you know it, you've got half a dozen pieces of content with not a huge amount of effort. Let's be honest. So that's kind of the two first points there. Start creating and redistribute as much content as possible. I hope I've explained that obviously in a nutshell, very briefly, but hopefully understandably. If you've got any doubts or questions, please do ask. Networking, I think, is really important. On our podcast, we recently interviewed a guy that's worked for Barca, he's worked for PSG, and he's now I think at Chelsea. And he talked about basically how he got the job, and he said it was through networking. He got in touch with the clubs, went big. He was like, I want to work with the biggest clubs in the world. And he basically said, hey, I'm here, I'm available to translate, or to, he spoke for, I think he speaks Spanish, he was learning French. Or, you know, correct English, or I can help you with your social media. And basically he says in the interview, he says he bullied them. But basically it was networking. He got in touch with them and asked, you know, if there's anything he could do. I do it in networking. I've got guests on the podcast purely by reaching out to them. You'd be surprised how many are available to reply. I've had people contact me, and I normally give them this advice. Actually, I normally say, hey, if you want to get into this world, then what are you making already? Show me your videos, show me your blogs, show me, I don't know, whatever it is you're doing. And if you're not doing that, you need to be wondering why you want to work in TV. And then the final point is read widely. I don't know how much you guys are into reading, but I read a lot, not so much this year. I had a baby last December. But I try and read a lot, very widely. I try and read in Spanish, although it takes me a long time. Reading in Spanish is difficult for me. I think because I've never really studied the language as such, but I'm getting quicker at it. But I try and read. I read a lot about journalism. I read a lot about media and media production. I read a lot about football and other sports. But I also read a lot of biographies and autobiographies. I'm currently reading Dave Grohl's autobiography. I don't know if you've got any Foo Fighters fans. We read really widely. Philosophy, quite like, and I can't recommend that enough, because if you want to work in something where you're thinking on the fly, you need words to come to your mind as quickly as possible. To immerse yourself in words and vocabulary is definitely the best thing to do, and it'll enrichen the way that you can talk, the way that you can write, the way that you can write, and probably the way that you can translate as well. Yeah. Just to round out the circle of the Malcolm Gladwell Outliers quotes. I reread the book recently, so maybe they're at the forefront of my mind. I also do a thing that Ryan Holiday does. If you don't know Ryan Holiday, he's a prolific author. He's written, I think, 12 books in as many years. He's 34, and he's look him up. And he does this thing where he makes a note, or he bends a page, or
whatever of the book he's reading, he comes across an interesting quote or story, and then he goes back and puts it on a little index card. And I've started doing that. I think it's a great thing to do. It gives you interesting quotes, interesting stories, interesting anecdotes at the forefront of your mind, and also they're there. You can go back through them, and like I say, he's a prolific author. He's a prolific reader as well. And that kind of rounds out my little presentation. I talked for far longer than I thought I was going to. But yeah, that's me. Feel free to look me up on Twitter, LinkedIn, me an email if you want. And I want to take this opportunity to promote my podcast 21 for 21. It's on all major podcast platforms. It's Passport Media. If you're interested in that, then give it a listen. And now I will take any questions. I'm going to start with Christina's question that she's put in the chat about interpretation, foundation year studying Spanish. Try to listen to as many podcasts as I can and watch movies with Spanish subtitles. Okay, very good. Any methods you would recommend? Yeah, I think your immersion is the number one thing. You try and immerse yourself as much as possible. Listening to podcasts is definitely a good thing. Watching movies with Spanish subtitles. I'd say with Spanish subtitles and Spanish audio, I know a lot of people do one or the other, and I think you just end up focusing on the easiest one. So I would say try and fully immerse yourself in it as you can. The other thing that I would say is keep long lists of vocab and phrases. That was what I did when I first moved to Spain, and I referred to them probably twice a day. I went back over them and see if I sort of checked if I could remember what they meant or what they were, and if I kind of they were the forefront of my memory. So do that. I did it on my phone, but you could do it on a physical list if you wanted, or however works best for you on index cards. So yeah, keep long lists of vocabulary and phrases. Full phrases is always good, rather than just kind of individual words, because we don't talk in individual words. So find the way that's useful to you and interesting to you. And then yeah, any practice opportunities you can get, I guess you've got that through university. But if you can join, I don't know, a conversation class in addition, that's probably always good. Yeah, like you said, watching podcasts and listening to podcasts and watching movies. And then the big one I would say that I found for people learning Spanish or any language, and I've tried teaching myself bits of Italian and Portuguese as well, is don't ask why. I find a lot of people like learning Spanish, the big one is always like ser and estar. And they're like, why is this one ser? Or why is this one estar? And the best advice there I can give is just, I guess if you're studying linguistics, maybe you need to know why. But if you want to learn it as a language, is don't ask why. Just learn that's how it is, and accept it. Because when you learn your first language, I don't know what your first language is, you didn't ask why. You just learned that that's how language works, you know. So yeah, that's kind of my recommendations for trying to improve language learning. I'm sure there are people that studied learning languages that give you far better answers than me. It's a guy that just landed in Spain 6 years ago and decided that he was the language. But yeah, and then aside from that, be keen. You've got to want to learn the language. I know plenty of Brits here that have been here as long as I have, if not longer, and their Spanish is god awful. Whereas I kind of landed here and I was like, I'm going to learn Spanish. So yeah, I don't know if that's answered that question. I feel like I could just waffle and rant on for ages. It's difficult when you can't see people either.
Thank you very much, Jamie.
Tom has got a question, I think. Oh, sorry, Mohammed.
Oh, I just wanted for Tom to ask his question.
Okay.
Tom, we can't hear you. I think you just muted yourself, Tom. Could you try now? Still, unfortunately, we can't hear you. Maybe you want to try and type your question in the chat box. Meanwhile, does anyone have a question?
Hello.
Oh yeah, we can hear you now.
Ah, there we go.
Yes, Tom?
Tom?
Okay. So Tom, maybe
Hello?
you want to, yeah? Could we-
Okay, sorry about this. You can hear me
yeah,
now?
yes, we can.
We can hear
Okay.
you now.
Okay. Sorry about that. Yeah, I just wanted to say thanks a lot, James, for coming on. It's been really interesting. What I wanted to ask
thank you.
was, obviously, it must be quite a competitive sort of field to get into. And so I wanted to ask, like, what do you think set you apart from the rest in getting your job, and then like, how do you think I or anyone who would be interested in getting a similar job could set themselves apart, or any ways you could think of?
Yeah, that's a good question. Nice to meet you, Tom. Thanks for asking. Well, thanks for joining, and thanks for asking a question. How could you set yourself apart? How did I set myself apart? I think I got very lucky, if I'm honest. I don't know if you know about hero bias, but that's kind of like the when you hear a story, it's always like from the main character's point of view, and it's someone that's done something successful. Not that I think I've been majorly successful, but I'm here talking about my story as if it was all intentional, and it wasn't by any means. I came to Spain when pre-Brexit we could come to Spain quite easily, and got work as an English teacher. And from there I got all my papers in order and learned Spanish, which I think definitely helped me. And I would recommend, I don't know what language you're learning, Tom, or languages you speak, but I think it's a great help learning another language, or two or three, or Spanish and Portuguese. There you go. So good football languages. You could, if I use Manchester United as an example. If I were at Manchester United right now, I would be scrambling to learn as much Portuguese as I can, because if someone's going to go and interview Cristiano Ronaldo, I want it to be me. I did the same when I was at MotoGP. I was like, I'm going to learn as much Italian as I can, because I figured that, a lot of the riders are Italian. And I wanted it to be me that did the interview, or at least, when I listened to the interviews, they often said different things in Italian as Ronaldo often does in Portuguese. So yeah, I think that's a good thing. And then, like I say, I got my papers in order. I learned Spanish, and so when they were looking for English natives in MotoGP, I was a good candidate, because I already had the kind of the working language of the office as well, and of a lot of the athletes are Spanish or Italian. So I think that's probably what set me apart, really. Other than making sure that I had as much practice as I could, going back to the first quote that I put up from Malcolm Gladwell. Where's it gone? It's gone. It's reordered itself. There you go. Practice isn't the thing that you do once you're good, it's the thing you do that makes you good. So I made sure I had as much practice as I could in storytelling, in making videos, in learning the technical side of it as best I could, learning editing as best I could. So I spent hours on YouTube watching tutorials and editing videos and practicing. And when I say, if you want to start making content, I don't mean it just to have like a portfolio and stuff you can show. I mean, so that you hone that craft almost. So that's kind of would be my recommendation to stand out. Certainly when we've hired people, I've never been in a position where I've been in charge of hiring, but we've looked at profiles, or we've had conversations where it's been like, do you know so-and-so, or have you seen so-and-so, or do you know of anyone that would be interesting for this job? And you kind of go, yeah, well, there's this guy that's got his own YouTube channel, and he makes weekly videos about whatever. And so that certainly sets people out, whilst at the same time giving you the opportunity to hone your skills and your craft. So that would be my big recommendation, I think, of what you could do. So yeah, work on your languages, maybe work on how you've started podcasting and writing. There you go. So and they could overlap. I don't know, with your podcast you could transcribe it, and then you've got yourself a nice article. Like I said, that way of creating as much content in as little effort as possible. But yeah, certainly I think that's the best way. And don't worry too much about kind of getting a huge audience for your podcast, or getting a big monetization or sponsorship deal. Or ultimately, that's something that you can later on show and say, hey, this is what I've done.
certainly that's what I'd do, and that's what I'd be asking if well, I've had people contact me on LinkedIn and stuff and say, hey, what can I do to do the job that you're doing, kind of thing. And I say, well, what are you already doing? You know, send me links to your content. And I think that's one of the great things now in 2021 is that anyone can make content and kind of show what they can do whilst also developing a really useful skill. So I hope that's answered your question, Tom.
Well, thank you very much, Jamie. That was really useful. Anyone has any question? No? Okay, maybe I'll end actually with one question. So
okay,
in the department, a lot of our students study languages, and they study how they analyze language, how they analyze speech, how they analyze discourse. I just wanted to ask you to what extent you think these skills could relate to the work of journalists, and how is that different from traditional media to kind of like, you know, the social media that with the rise of TikTok and other social media platforms?
Do you mean sort of the use of language, of sort of different contexts or different?
Yeah, to kind of like, you know how
kind of analyze it from a...
and how they could analyze, like, you know, all of like language for not only like, you know, the direct meaning, the indirect meaning, all of these things.
Okay, sure. Yeah, certainly I think for translating that's really important. I can give you quite a nice example actually. I in MotoGP, I don't know if any of you follow MotoGP, but we did a lot of kind of behind the scenes videos where the riders would be interacting, and quite often it was in Spanish, sometimes in Italian, occasionally in French. And one of the things that was kind of important for me was to translate it correctly in terms of the kind of the culture and their age. So there were things that they said that I could think of like a translation for, but then I was sort of like, is that how a 24-year-old motorbike world champion would say those things? And so for me, it was kind of like, you know, and I think about our audience as well, because they want to relate to these athletes and these personalities as well. Certainly in simultaneous translation, it's difficult maybe to get that. You don't have that much time to think about those things, but in subtitling you do. And for me, that was kind of an important thing for getting the way that character, for want of a better word, the way that that athlete was portrayed in our video. And I wanted to be, you know, you can't translate everything literally. Certainly in like slang and swear words and stuff, you can't translate literally because different swear words, or like, I don't know, the equivalent maybe has different severity if you translate it literally. And so it was important for me to try and get that as accurate as possible, even if I wasn't translating it literally. So that was something that we had a lot of conversations about. I had a lot of conversations with the English guys I worked with that maybe didn't necessarily have the level of Spanish for translating, or I'd kind of go to them and saying like, hey, he's saying this. Is that the way people talk? Like, because sometimes you get into that kind of, you know, Spanglish or whatever you want to call it way of thinking, and it's like, do people actually talk like this? Is that right? So for me, the kind of cultural and the context of it, I think, was always very important. And then journalistically, yeah, it's people say one thing and mean another a lot, don't they? And I think you have to be aware of that in translating as well. Certainly, I remember one of the first things I translated, Luis Suarez's leaving press conference, and he was asked about the president of the club at the time, Bartomeu, and he wasn't in good standing with a lot of the fans. And the journalist kind of asked him a question in a roundabout kind of way, and Suarez answered it in a roundabout kind of way to you know, so that nobody was being explicit and getting in trouble, but everyone knew what it meant. And that was difficult to translate. That was, you know, to find the way of not being explicit or being implicit and still being accurate to what he was saying. So yeah, I think certainly thinking about how people speak and how people talk and how people interact and and how people interact in different contexts. You know, I'm speaking to you in probably a different way that I'll speak to my wife or my friends, or, you know, these are all, I think, important things in this world, certainly if you're thinking about translating. And then, of course, if you're translating a press release about an injury, the language that you use there will be different again, because you want it to be as accurate as possible to the injury. Or if you're translating, I don't know, well, it depends on what you're translating as well. I think is quite important. If it's I don't know, a list of potential side effects of some medicine, you want it to be as accurate as possible. Whereas, I don't know, a video about a MotoGP rider is, you don't have to be as literal and as accurate, as long as the meaning gets across clearly, I think.
Good. So it was good to hear that, Jamie. It's always good to see these opportunities that are available at universities, because another thing we've again come back to a lot in the series so far is the importance of networking in an industry like sports media.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, that's something that, you know, if you go to our YouTube channel, we've got that playlist of so you want to work in sport media, and it's something that comes up time and time again. Is like, hey, reach out to people, get in touch with people. And people are quite responsive in my experience, and in the experience of other people we've spoken to. So yeah, if you're listening and you're studying, or you finished studying, or you're thinking about studying and looking at a career in sport media, then yeah, why not get in touch? And you never know who might get back to you.
So definitely, if you don't ask, then you don't get. So thanks again for listening. If you have a question for Jamie or for us based on the contents of the talk, our email address is 21for21sportmedia@gmail.com.
Well remembered.
Or just wherever if you saw this post on advertised on LinkedIn or Twitter, you can comment this on where you first heard about us, or if not,
sure.
Twitter, I'm at Stuart.Levy, and you're at Jamie the Coles.
Correct. It's all in the description, on whether you're watching on YouTube or listening on whatever podcast platform. It's all in the description there. So yeah, you can find us.
Thanks for listening, and we'll be back for the final 3 lessons of Series 1 very shortly.